Okay. Okay, good evening. Good evening, everyone. We continue in the introduction of the Mesilas Yesharim. And now that the Ramchal has discussed that people really are not understanding what proper Hasidus is because the very intelligent people are focusing their energies on other studies, while the ones that are not as intelligent are focusing on this, but they don't really know how to focus on it properly. And people just think it comes automatically, that they don't have to work on it. And therefore they figure what is it that they think is what Hashem wants, and they figure that's what the way is to serve Hashem. So now he continues. We're going to start from the Hebrew words, if you're in the text, starting with the words, Im lo nistakalnu. That's the next paragraph, Im lo nistakalnu. So he's saying, we'll read just English now, if we do not analyze what true fear of Hashem actually means and what are its ramifications, how can we acquire it? And how can we escape the forces that make us forgetful of it, even though we may know its importance? So what he's saying is, there's a very important aspect of yira, true fear of Hashem, and all its details. How can we acquire it when there's so many things in the world that prevent it from coming into our lives and has us forget about it? So how are we going to be able to understand it if we don't really know how important it is? We know how important it is, but we're not having the right application and learning of it. So, for example, what is proper yira that we should have? Well, he'll talk about it more in another couple pages. But unfortunately, many people feel that yira, the fear of God, means that Hashem is going to punish somebody for doing an avera. And the problem with that understanding, although there's a certain degree of truth to it, but again, that's a juvenile way of looking at things. It's a primitive way of looking at things, and worse, it's misleading. When you say that you do something wrong and God punishes you, that conveys the idea that when we sin, we hurt God. And then he retaliates in anger. That's what punishment means. You did something, you got to get punished. However, in the book of Eov, it says, even if you sin, what have you done to Hashem? Because every intelligent person understands that Hashem's perfect. And if we do an avera, we can't hurt Hashem. So that can't be the real understanding of what fear of God is going to go and punish you. So what should we be afraid of? What we really should be afraid of, and this is the level that we should be approximating, is that if we let the Yetzer Hara fool us, we'll do things that are self-destructive for ourselves. And we'll hurt ourselves. And the averas we do bring destruction upon ourselves. And when we study the Torah, which gives nourishment for our neshama, and we do the mitzvahs, which are the only means of bridging the gap between finite man and the infinite God. And if we don't do those things that create this good environment and energy for us, then we jeopardize our relationship with Hashem. And that's what we should be fearing. The fear that we are self-destructing ourselves. The fear that we are jeopardizing our relationship and our eternal existence from this. That's what proper yira is. So, let's say a small child does not understand the danger of running into traffic. Okay, so the parents may need to spank the child in order for him to discourage putting himself at risk of injury again. So many people have this attitude that we think that divine punishment, it's when a person has to be disciplined because he lacks the understanding of the true value of Torah and mitzvahs. And Hashem has to punish him as a little child. But a mature, sensible person should appreciate what the mitzvahs are and how the mitzvahs are for our good and welfare. And the fear of doing an avera should be nothing other than the fear of injuring ourselves, both physically and spiritually. So we don't really look at yira in the way it's really meant to be understood. we remain with this childish level. And that's what Luzzatto is saying. We have to really understand what Yira means. And if we go around with a simplistic understanding that, oh, Hashem gets upset with us and he punishes us, nobody wants to be close to somebody that punishes them. But if we understand, as we mentioned on Sunday, I believe, in the special topic, that it's the natural consequences that hurt us, so we should be afraid of that. So during this time of this COVID crisis, there is supposed to be a Yiras Hashem over here. But many of us are looking in the wrong place for the Yiras Hashem. We're afraid, I better be good. You got all these things you could do to bring merit upon yourself. Certain prayers, if you do Kiddush Levana, nothing's going to happen to you this month. If you say a special prayer, it'll help. I better make sure to give a little extra tzedakah because they're telling me if I give tzedakah, I won't die, and all these things. So we have to realize, what are we afraid of over here? So how many people that have not studied Mesilas Yesharim are walking away with a childish understanding of Yiras Hashem? But I better make sure that Hashem doesn't punish me and doesn't give me the virus and makes me suffer. So I better do things to make sure that that's not going to happen. So that's not going to foster a loving relationship with Hashem. You're just trying to avoid something bad happening to you. So Yiras Hashem, as to say, notwithstanding what will happen with the virus or not, even if there was no virus, I want to do mitzvahs, I want to study Torah, and I want to stay very far away from virus, because it has nothing to do with the virus. It has everything to do with my relationship with Hashem and how I want to make sure to do the best things so I have the best relationship with Hashem. And we'll talk more about it. He's going to talk about it himself more. So that's one idea that many people walking around, they don't understand what Yiras Hashem is. And therefore, what do you really want to have? You just want this thing to end so the threat of death will be gone, and then I don't got to worry about Hashem anymore. But really, you have to have just as much Yiras Hashem for Hashem now as 6 months from now, when God willing, everything's going to be better. You have to have the same level of Yiras Hashem. The level of Yiras Hashem should not change just because it's a scarier time and a more dangerous time. That's not why our levels of Yiras Hashem should go up. Yiras Hashem should be very strong when everything's going amazing and there's no threat of danger at all. But you just don't want to make that mistake. Let me give you a little idea of what, and it's the same thing, Yiras Hashem, Yira of your spouse. So it's a little bit of a joke, but anyway, what's real Yiras your wife? When you're really afraid of your wife, guys, you know what it is? You come home one fine day, you're about to open the front door, you put your key in the door, you're ready to open the door, and your wife's in the house, and at that moment you realize that today is your wife's anniversary and you forgot all about it. That's Yiras your wife. That's a childish way of looking at it. But there's much deeper idea that, respect and reverence and things like that. So we got to get out of that immature attitude, and that's what Luzzatto is saying over here regarding Yira. And then he continues when he talks about understanding what love is. Next paragraph, ha'avam kamoke, similarly love. If we don't make an effort to instill it in our hearts, how will we find it within us? Whence will come the adherence with the passion of our soul for the blessed one and with his Torah? If we are not attentive to his greatness and exaltation, which could provide us with this communion with him, this dveikus. In other words, if we don't think about God's greatness, how are we going to come to love him? The Tanya says that in every Jew, regardless of how far he has drifted away from his Yiddishkeit, there is a nucleus of love for Hashem that's concealed in the deepest recesses of his heart. And one of the Meforshim explains this is the whole idea of the vision that Moshe had with the burning bush. Now, when Moshe saw the burning bush, the Jews were on a very low level of spirituality. They're very, very far away from Hashem. And that's when Hashem's telling him, you're going to take the Jewish people and take them out of Mitzrayim. So what's the message of the burning bush? So the idea that Hashem is conveying to Moshe, we know there's a historical fact, at least until recently, but it went really well for about 3,000 years, through the time of the Balatanya, that even Jews who were very, very far away from their Yiddishkeit, but when they were forced under threat of being put to death to give away their Yiddishkeit, many Jews were so alienated from Yiddishkeit, would rather die than convert and leave the faith. Now, how do you explain that, asks the Balatanya. How do you explain that? And he says there is a part deep in a Yid that really loves Hashem, no matter how concealed it is from him. And although he may do many things, but he doesn't really, in his mind, he doesn't really think that he's doing something so terrible. So he doesn't keep Shabbos, he doesn't keep kosher, so he rationalizes it. He says, listen, Hashem gave me a Yetzer Hara. If I wouldn't have such a Yetzer Hara, he made me poor, so hard to work. I have to work on Shabbos. And I'll do tshuva, Hashem will forgive me. Rationalize everything. And he can do one thing and another. But then there comes a point where the fellow realizes, if I do this, then I've gone too far. And bowing down to the cross, even a Jew who's far away says, no, I can't cross Hashem like this. I can't do this to him. And the love is really there. But sometimes it takes a very, very critical situation for the person to realize how much he loves Hashem. But it's there. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's absolutely there. So therefore, Moshe has this prophetic vision of the thorn bush. What's the thorn bush? It's barren of leaves. It has no fruit. It's like a Jew who has no Torah and has no mitzvahs, but yet it's burning, which means they'll accept martyrdom with a fiery passion, just like the greatest tzaddik. And Hashem is saying, listen, don't sell the Jewish people short, even though they are so secular. But he says, I'm the God of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And what he means to say is within every Jewish soul, there's a fragment of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov whose lives really want to be totally dedicated to Hashem. That nucleus that's inside the Jew can erupt with a passionate love for Hashem when he realizes how vain the world is and how the pursuit of pleasure is. Sometimes they don't realize it. But when push comes to shove and the Jew's got to give up his religion, that far they would not go. So with that understanding, if that we really have this love, so we have to look at it a little bit differently now. So we may not always be consciously aware of this intense love that we have for Hashem. So we have to understand, why is that? And the answer is because there's barriers that we have constructed that interfere with this attraction to Hashem. Let's look at the following mashal. Iron should be attracted to a magnet. A powerful magnet should be, and iron's close by, should just, boom, cling to the magnet. But what if you put something in between, very thick item that's in between that breaks the magnetic force? Then the iron does not want to cling to the magnet. But by nature, the magnet has a very strong pull. And the iron should want to go right to it. But there's something in between. So the same thing, Hashem is the powerful magnet. And our neshama is that iron, that metal that wants to cling, like boom, right away. But the problem is we've created a very thick barrier comprised of indulgence in the physical desires, which suppress our spiritual aspirations. And therefore, we don't feel the pull. But to say I don't have any feelings for Hashem, that's distorting reality. We have to realize that at our core, we have a very intense craving for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the problem is that when we indulge ourselves, we frustrate the natural attraction that exists for us. And, it would be a lot better, if we could overcome our temptations and permit the magnetism, so to speak, to be effective, and would reveal our love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's the issue. So when we're looking at the aspect of loving Hashem, we got to realize, what's it take to love Hashem? People just say, I love Hashem. You love Hashem, you really love Hashem, how come you don't do what he says? Right? So what does loving Hashem mean? What does it depend on? And people don't realize that we do a lot of behaviors that by definition are saying that we don't love Hashem. So imagine and how hurtful that is to the person. Now let's say, for example, a single person, and I'm not, I don't have, any singles in mind. I'm just giving you this for purpose of an example. A single person who just never gets married, not because there's a shortage of shidduchim. The person's went out with 100 people. But you know what the problem is? Ever since he's been growing up, he always indulges himself, or his parents indulged him, to get whatever he wants. He's always used to getting every single thing that he wants, and exactly the way he wants it. So is that person ever going to be able to settle on somebody? There's nobody's going to be able to be the perfect spouse that has everything he wants. So although there's a potential, he could love people, but the problem is he's created so many barriers, it doesn't enable himself to love other people, because there's other things he loves. He loves himself much more than he could ever love anybody else. So that's the idea over here. If we really don't dig deeply into what loving Hashem is, we're never going to be able to experience that mitzvah of loving Hashem. He moves on to the next point. The next Hebrew word begins, Eich titar machshavavtenu. How can our thoughts be pure? That's the next aspect of avodas Hashem, purity of thought. If we don't make an effort to cleanse them from the defects that are the consequences of our physical nature. Purity of thought, he means to do things that are l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. And for a lot of us, we might think that's an ideal that's way beyond the average person, and that can only be achieved by a tzaddik. In other words, we can ask ourselves, how can I avoid thinking about something that comes to mind? Purity of thought is you shouldn't have the wrong thoughts. You shouldn't be thinking lustful thoughts or, ideas that I want to take revenge on somebody, or just how I can't control what I'm thinking about. How can I control what I'm thinking about? So the Ibn Ezra really gives a good insight into this. Ibn Ezra, on the last of the Seres Adibros, of not to covet. So he asks a simple question. He says, how in the world can God tell us not to covet? It's a natural reaction. I see somebody has more than me, and I have less, and his life is so much better, and my life is so much worse. So, of course, I wish I had what he had. Now, remember, transgressing the avera of coveting does not mean you plan on stealing it from him. That's other averos. Coveting means that you're jealous of what he has. And that he has a better house, he has a better wife, he has a better car, he's got more money, all these things, better kids. So, I wish I could have it like him. Yet the Torah says you cannot covet. But that's involuntary feelings. How can I control them? So the Ibn Ezra gives a mashal. The mashal is to a local ignoramus, a low-class person, complete pauper, lives in a shamble of a house, ripped up clothes, doesn't have a nickel to his name. Would that person ever really imagine for 1 minute that he's going to marry the princess of the kingdom. If somebody says, you could marry the princess, are you crazy? That's impossible. There's no way I could. He's not even coveting her. Maybe he's coveting the poor girl across the street, maybe. But to covet the princess, it's not shaykh. It's not possible. It can't even enter into his realm. It's so absurd. So says the Even Ezra, if a person really believes in Hashem, if a person was totally committed to thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, you don't commit adultery, if a person really understands that Hashem gives you exactly what you need, and if you needed more, he'd give you more. If you really believe that, then you would never covet anybody else. So that's what it's about. You see, if you don't do anything, you don't do any work on yourself, so the natural reaction is to be jealous and to covet. When you work on your emunah on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you really believe that it's all true, then of course it'd be crazy to covet, because it doesn't belong to you, and you're a decent person. The problem is you don't work on that. So that's what he's saying. How do we purify our thoughts if we don't work on it? It takes a lot of work to put us into that position that we would think it's absurd to be able to do such a thing. But you got to think these through. And if you don't spend time thinking, you can't fulfill this. Let's look at the next paragraph. He says, Mi yiyashrein, umi yisaknein. If we don't attend closely to our character traits, which may be in need of correction and being set straight, who will correct them? Truthful analysis of these subjects will benefit us as well as others to whom we can teach it. So what Luzzatto was saying, of course, everyone can benefit from improving their character traits. Now, there are some traits that we should totally divest ourselves from because they're grossly improper, but that's not necessarily the major problems in our life. But there's a lot of character traits which are commendable, but still need certain correction. For example, let's look at a character trait of humility, where the Talmud says humility is a very good character trait. But the fact of the matter is, no matter how good humility is, it's only good at the right time, in the right place, in the right situation. Yet we see that Shul HaMelech used the attribute of humility in a place where he should not have. When God commanded him to destroy Amalek, and the Jewish people wanted to save the king and to save the animals, he felt, who was he to tell them not? And when Shmuel criticized him, he said the following, be it that you are small in your eyes, but I've made you the leader of the Jewish people. So therefore we see that even humility can be misplaced. And there are times where you're being humble, and that's the natural way you are. You're a humble person, but it could be a terrible aveira. So therefore, and interestingly, the Gemara, the Medrash tells us a similar idea. It says that whoever applies mercy in situations that really need strictness, as Shul HaMelech did, will eventually act with cruelty in situations which call for leniency. That same Shul HaMelech, where he did not know when to be humble, he shouldn't have been humble. When he hears Lashon Hara about the city of Nov of the Kohanim, and he suspects that they're siding with David, he wasn't so humble. He became cruel to them. And he just killed them all out. Just because this is... So therefore, so Shalmach, see, he's using humility. And he's using leadership. Yeah, but he's using the humility when he should have used leadership. And he's using leadership when he should have used humility. So therefore, proper application of midos is a very tricky thing if we don't understand when is there the time to apply one midah and another midah. And now this is one of my favorite lines in the book. He continues, Huma Sha'omer Shlomo. He continues, and this is what Shlomo Melech said, and we said it in the Parsha class. He quotes Mishlei. Let's read in the Hebrew. Im tevakshenu kakesef uchematmonim tachbesenu. If you will seek it as one who seeks silver and searches for it as a treasure, Az tavin yiras Hashem. Then you will understand fear of Hashem. So now the great diuk, the great implications, one of my favorite diukim of the whole Sefer. He says, Eina Omer, it doesn't say, if you'll search it like gold and you'll search it like a treasure, Az tavin philosophia, then you'll understand philosophy. Az tavin tchuna, then you'll understand astronomy. Then you'll understand medicine. Then you'll understand laws. It says, no, then you will understand Yiras Hashem, fear of Hashem. So what does that mean? It means if you really want to understand what fear of Hashem is, or any other spiritual thing, you have to look for it like silver and search for it like a treasure. And what he's basing this, his understanding of this pasuk, and the implication is, Gemara says, Hakol bidei shamayim chutz mi'yiras shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven except fear of Hashem. We know that when a person is conceived in Shamayim, Hashem decides whether you'll be rich or poor, smart or not, but no, strong, weak, healthy, not. But it's never decreed if you're going to be a tzaddik or a rasha. That's a choice you have to make. It's very possible a person can have all kinds of skills and talents and knowledge of a lot of things. But fear of Hashem, in other words, being a good, proper human being, that you have to do on your own. Now, of course, if you'll exert yourself to find the right path, Hashem can help you succeed in the direction you want to go. That's true. But you've got to make that decision. You've got to make the effort, because that's the only thing you really are in charge of. So here is the real challenge over here, the irony. There are many things in life that you really don't have control over. Because really the Gemara says how much money you're going to make during the year is decided in Rosh Hashanah. Hashem decided how smart you're going to be. Hashem decides if you're going to be a wealthy person. That's really not in your hands. But what is in your hands is if you're a person who has Yiras Shamayim. So isn't it foolish to spend so much effort in something that Hashem has already decided, and whether you make a lot of effort or not a lot of effort, it's going to be that way anyway. And yet you neglect the things that are totally in your control, which really will determine your eternal reality, and all the other things that are only the transient, temporary realities that have already been decided by Hashem anyway. Yes, you have to make some effort, but you don't have to go crazy over this. That you're making all your efforts, you're figuring out all the angles. Even shidduchim, Hashem's already decided the shidduch. And everybody's making extreme efforts, way beyond necessary, as if it isn't going to happen otherwise. But then for one's own Yiras Shamayim, you don't make the same effort. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Radishev once saw a man running in the street. I said, Rabbi Yid, why are you running so fast? He says, I'm running after my parnasa, my livelihood. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says, how do you know your parnasa is ahead of you and you're running towards it? Maybe your parnasa is behind you and you're actually running away from it. So the problem is, that's what he's saying, that we're giving most of our efforts in the pursuit of parnasa, which is already determined. And it's not contingent on how much effort we make, but we don't make the same energy and effort for the things that are only in our control. You will not be a good Jew by accident. You will not have Yiras Shamayim. You will not have good midos. Some people are born with a nice personalities, but then when it's time to be tough and you have to be tough, they don't even know how to do it. And the second and final, we'll end with this. What's the comparison if you're searching for gold? Like you're searching for gold, you'll find Yiras Hashem. One thing we know, when you're looking for silver or gold, and you find a little, let's say you're looking for a vein of gold, and you're digging and digging, and now I found a little shiny thing. It looks like gold. The guy doesn't say, okay, I found a piece of gold. That's worth a couple thousand. I'm going to go home. No, if you're searching for it and then you start to get a little bit, you're not going to be happy with a little bit. You're going to dig more and more and more to get more and more and more. He's saying that's how you have to look for Yiras Shamayim, like you're looking for gold. You look at a goal and you find a little bit of your Shemayim, you're not satisfied with that. You have to go with more and more and more until you get your Shemayim. So again, Lutzada was saying we have to understand how valuable these goals are. And that they don't come by themselves. And they only can come with our efforts. So therefore, it behooves us to spend more time focusing in these areas, and then you can, with Hashem's help, succeed. And in other areas where it really isn't going to make any difference, why are you spending so much time? And that's what Rabbi Yisrael Salanter meant when we said a couple of days ago, if I only have 15 minutes, spend it learning Musar. Because then you'll find 3 hours to learn Gemara, because you're going to realize, why am I wasting my time with things I shouldn't be wasting with? Okay, thank you. That's all for tonight. For those who want to hear the Pirkei Avos class coming up, I'm just going to end this meeting, and then in just 30 seconds, I'll start it up again if you want to hear the Pirkei Avos class. Okay.
Bye.